So welcome everyone from wherever you're joining from. It's great to have so many people here and so many people interested in the event. And I'm really looking forward to hearing Larissa's talk. And since so many people are maybe not familiar with us, I'll just say, if you don't know me, I'm Emily. I'm on the board of APRA, or the Amsterdam Psychedelic Research Association. We're basically a volunteer-run organization based out of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and we're focused on sharing research about psychedelic substances and other forms of altered states of consciousness in all fields. And we organize different kinds of academic events, journal clubs, and lectures, mostly in person, but also sometimes online, like today. And we also have some social events just to build community with other people passionate about psychedelic science. So if anyone's interested in those types of things, maybe I'll put our website in the chat just in case. So feel free to reach out or think about becoming an official APRA member. So yeah. I guess now I'm very excited to introduce our speaker for today. Larissa Carneiro is a religious scholar and instructor at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. And today she is going to speak about her recent work and preliminary findings about the religious protocol and the process of healing in the Church of Santo Daime. So I think during the presentation, if there's any questions or comments, it would be best to put them in the chat or raise your hand if you have something to ask during the presentation, since there's quite a few people here. But yeah, I think that's it from me. So I'll pass it off to Larissa. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Emily. And thank you so much to APRA to invite me to this event. I'm very honored, very happy. One thing that I think ayahuasca brought to my life is to meet good people. Maybe that's the magic of the substance. I'm going to share my PowerPoint with you guys. And I'm going to show you some videos at the same time. That is very important to understand how the Church of Santo Daime work, how they call the rituals work. And I want actually you pay attention to this picture here. This is one of the major churches of the Santo Daime. It is in the middle of the Amazon forest in the community of Céu do Mapiá. And I want you to see now, like the assemblage of bodies in the church, how they are together, how they are dressed. That will be my presentation. The first, methodology and thesis. What is ayahuasca? If someone doesn't know very much about ayahuasca, the many contexts, which is very important, in which ayahuasca is put to work, the healing promises of ayahuasca in all the contexts, the Church of Santo Daime. What is the Church of Santo Daime? What is the difference between ayahuasca and Daime? And then we are going to go to the process of healing and revelations in the church, what I call the religious protocol, to make some kind of parallel with the scientific protocol for scientific trials, which evolves around mirações, that can be translated as visions, and hymns. So my methodology, I'm going to go very fast here to actually go to the analysis of the process of healing. My methodology, I conduct ethnographic work with the Church of Santo Daime. I have visited many communities. I participate in the rituals for healing and for other purpose, but I think all of them, in some sense, are for healing. I interview members of the church, and I also have conversations with scientists who have conducted work with ayahuasca. My questions is, how they experience healing. What is healing? What kind of sort of healing we're talking about here? What is the role of these communal rituals that involve music, that involve dance and prayer? How they are played in the process? How do Santo Daime members combine the psychoactive substance, commonly known as ayahuasca, with the cosmology of the religion, the doctrine of the religion, the lore of the religion, and how they engage in this ritual preparation, which includes the brew preparation, and use that to frame, apply, and interpret these spiritual experiences. So if you don't know, this is ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is a very interesting form of psychoactive substance because, well, it's part of the classic, what the so-called classic psychedelics, but differently from psilocybin, different from peyote and LSD. These are the four classic psychedelics. Ayahuasca is not one single component. Ayahuasca is a brew, and ayahuasca has many different recipes. So far, more than 130 were cataloged. But basically, and actually with different also ingredients. Although the major ingredient is divine, Banisteriopsis caapi, that is rich in beta-carbolene. And the other one, most common, is Psychotria viridis, also known popular as chacruna, as rainha, that is the queen, that is rich in dimethyltryptamide, commonly known as DMT. That is one interesting thing about the church. It starts here, the religious actually protocol. We are not talking about an isolated molecule. We're talking about two plants with many different components. The DMT and the beta-carbolene is just one of them. Brewed together, bringing this brew to work, which is completely different from psilocybin, that you can actually ingest the mushroom and have the experience that is characteristic of the mushroom. So this is a very complex brew. In the church and indigenous contexts, you take the brew. So not much is known about actually in chemical perspective of how this actually brew works. Ayahuasca, these are the four, the four classic psychedelics. Ayahuasca, except LSD, ayahuasca and peyote and psilocybin has been used in indigenous and religious contexts for a long time. We actually don't know for how long has been used in indigenous contexts. We have some kind of archaeological findings that is evidence that has been used for at least 1,000 years. We have some kind of narrative from missionaries talking about indigenous people using this substance. And ayahuasca has many names for the indigenous people. What ayahuasca produces? Ayahuasca is actually from the name ayahuasca comes from the Quechua language. That is one of the big umbrella that has many nations under this umbrella. That means vine of the soul or vine of the dead, because they believe that the substance can give access actually to the world of the spirits, to the world of the dead, to the world of the ancestors. Well, so now we can see what they call the ayahuasca experience. The ayahuasca experience, you can have it can cause visions. It can cause, I don't like this name, but I'm using auditory hallucinations. I don't like the hallucinations because it has some context that's not actually there. It can unlock memories. cause serenity, a sense of empathy, joy, positive mood, love, a sense of connectedness, but also can cause bad experiences, which in Brazil has a very interesting name for that, that's peia. That is not a good experience. That is a bad experience in which the church and indigenous people interpret as part of the journey. Actually, in the I would say when anthropologists made research with the Kashinawa people that have been using ayahuasca for a long time, now they change a lot the way they use the substance, but they all describe it something that was not good to do it. So here also is a little bit different from the scientific perspective that sometimes try to create a control environment to minimize the possibility of having a bad experience. Here are the contexts in which the substance is used. You have the scientific setting, in which sometimes especially like in Netherlands, Switzerland, they actually have protocols to try the substance in communal settings. But most of the settings, for actually difficulty to approve the scientific protocol, they are individual. The person takes ayahuasca individually with therapist or with a physician. But in Netherlands and Switzerland, as far as I know, they have in some contexts that are ayahuasca retreats. So you have the scientific setting. We have the ayahuasca retreats. If you Google, you are going to find more than 900 ayahuasca retreats all over the world, including in Netherlands, but also, in Brazil, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, Europe, Spain, Netherlands, some of them in Australia, all over the world. And you have the religious settings, in which they are mostly religions that were born in Brazil, and now they have a global reach. The most important, Santo Daime, that's the first one, Barquinha, and União do Vegetal. União do Vegetal was founded around the 1960s, Barquinha around the 1940s, and Santo Daime around, officially founded in 1931. But it comes earlier than that. So ayahuasca is everywhere. You find ayahuasca now, it is a very common topic. And that is because what unifies, in some sense, these different contexts and the experience are different. You change the setting, you change the experience. So we know the substance is not acting alone. The healing process of ayahuasca are many. There are research in the scientific context. For example, people are researching ayahuasca for extreme cases of depression, for extreme cases of anxiety, for people with suicidal thoughts, for all kinds of mental illness or mental disorders. Also, that is I think the most common research with substance abuse, drug addiction, alcohol, crack cocaine, but also has been at some kind of trials in vitro, because ayahuasca apparently has an ability of causing neurogenesis, which means that could be a possible treatment for Parkinson's and also Alzheimer. And now the Church of Santo Daime. So the Church of Santo Daime was founded by this gentleman, Mestre Irineu, that was this African descended. His grandparents were enslaved people in Brazil. Brazil had the largest number of enslaved people in the world, was the last country to free the enslaved people. And different, for example, in the context of the West, that slavery was just in the South. In Brazil was in the entire country, especially because it was a country made of plantations. So the Church of Santo Daime cannot be understood without this context. The encounter of the three major matrices, ethnic and religious matrix in Brazil. You have this man who was born in the northeast of the country, looking for chances of working, moving with his family to the north part of the country that was not very colonized back then because of the rubber boom in the beginning of the 20th century. Well, of course, he was a black man. He would not live with Europeans' descendants because of racism. So he lived with close to indigenous people, and close to indigenous people, he tried ayahuasca many times. And in his visions, he saw a woman. He was Christianized, of course, so he understood this woman as being Our Lady of Immaculate Conception, which he called as well the Queen of the Forest. And she talked to him, and she told him to find a church and to spread the doctrine of the Church of Santo Daime. With he started, and that's the interesting thing. He was illiterate. He could not write or read. He worked as a frontier guard. And the way the doctrine of Santo Daime exists is through hymns. And the hymns are received because ayahuasca is one of the revelations that ayahuasca causes. Within the Church of Santo Daime, it's called Daime. The way the revelations, we can talk more about that. I have many interviews of people who received hymns. So you don't write the hymns, you receive the hymns under the influence of ayahuasca. But also interesting, sometimes through dreams. Because one of the effects that ayahuasca, at least for 2 weeks or sometimes 3 weeks, your dreams change. They are a little bit more vivid, which really looks like a message, a revelation. So you can see that the church is born in the affordance of the substance of causing visions. And the visions, what you hear, they reinforce the beliefs of the church. You see the other world. You see the supernatural world. Another interesting thing about the church is because the hymns are still produced. People still receive the hymns. So it's a live church with a live doctrine. Well, the dissemination of the church, it's very interesting because it started with Schultz, that was an ethnobotanist in Harvard, lived with indigenous communities who used ayahuasca. William Burroughs, heard about ayahuasca, was a completely addict in morphine, went to the Amazon forest, wrote with Allen Ginsberg like a book, the letters, Diage letters, Ayage is another name. And it became something that was very interesting for the counterculture in the 60s. So that's how ayahuasca started to actually become international, among other factors, phenomenon. So here we have ayahuasca and daime. As I said, they have many different recipes, but daime, you have many levels of cooking the substance. So you cook the substance with Cicotta de viridis, Banisteriopsis caapi, the vine and the leaves. You remove the cook, you cook again. You remove the cook, you cook again. You remove the cook, you cook again. So you have many grades of the substance. This is very, very concentrated and strong. Although I heard that some rituals are made with grades that are weaker. I never participated in one that is actually weaker. I'm just gonna jump a little bit here. I'm gonna go here, but I wanted to show you the process of making the daime. And then the religious protocol starts. We're talking about the lore, but when the substance is made, is sacred, is not simply cooked. You have rituals to make the substance. And this comes actually from indigenous people, but in the daime sometimes is even way more complex. So the preparation of the substance. We are not talking something that is produced in a lab. We are talking something that is collective produced. I put on the right side the translation, and you are gonna hear a hymn that was composed by Mestre Irineu, is still sang, and the founder of the church. And I also want you to pay attention in the lyrics. This is the revelation, and the lyrics teaches us how the substance is perceived and how the healing process is understood. One interesting thing, the hymns can sound a little bit naive if you just listen to them. But under the effect of ayahuasca, these hymns acquire layers of revelation and talks to you, teaches you things that you need to be taught. At the beginning of every single ritual, the ritual is open with prayer. In that moment of prayer, you pray for what you want the daime to teach you. And that's the mindset. So you don't go to these rituals with some vague idea of what's going to happen. You go to these rituals with respect and with a purpose. I wanted to call your attention, and I'm going to talk more about that, about the hymn. The hymn talking about the teachings of the daime. But the teachings don't come out of the blue. You have to work to deserve them. You have to walk in the line. You have to have a path. Most important, you have to have discipline. Discipline is a word that appears in many different hymns. It's something that you have to work. And the church is all about discipline. So you have the importance of the context. So you have the brew, and you saw the dynamic. Everybody in that moment, you don't make the brew without taking the brew. So everybody there is under the influence of Daime. Women, they wash the leaves, they wash Rainha, the queen. The men, they beat the jagube, the vine, the Banisteriopsis capi. That gender dynamic in Daime is very, very important. We can talk more about that. Has a historical reason, but as the doctrine progresses, acquire different meanings. The music plays a role. The vestment plays a role. The gender dynamics play a role. Forms of embodiment plays a role. The diet and the discipline. All the experience, although individual, you pray for what you need, they are done in the group. And the group does everything together. You could see like how the vine is beaten in one single rhythm. And all the rituals at the time, it means that everybody does everything together. This framed the experience. This gives people a sense of safety. This gives people a sense that they are not alone. And if you're talking about, for example, substance abuse, this is very important. Another thing is the access. That is a completely different access. In Brazil, many people from the Church of Santo Daime would never be able to afford, for example, psychotherapy. So you have actually ways of thinking about, the access of this kind of treatment. So now we're going to talk about bodies. Okay? So the church has two different attires, which actually in Portuguese is very interesting. The name is farda. Farda is the name that you use either for uniform that cops wear or the army is a uniform. They have two different kinds of uniform. One is blue and one is white. The white is usually for festivals. So this is here. It is how the church is organized. You have here the altar. There's a star of 6 points. You have men on one side, women on one side, and usually single women and girls have also a section, and single men and boys also have a section. So for example, here are men, women, young women, and girls, women, young men, and boys. Actually, the most experienced people, the elderly people in the church, they are gonna sit in these first seats here. And they are the core of the ceremony. They are the core because you look at them and they will be dealing with the experience in a very strong way, and they are not gonna let things down. They have to keep the rhythm. They have to be like support for the entire community. From now on, it started like if you have 3 chairs, you have 6, you have 12, 24, until you form this star, this mandala, that they call actually a living mandala with these two different genders in which they see like the two energies to create this source of power. This is another configuration that is also possible, but most of them is this configuration here. So here you have the altar. And another thing that is different, you cannot have the experience, and sometimes you can leave the circle, the mandala, if you're not feeling well, but as soon you go back, to your center, you have to go back to this circle. And the church has people that in English is actually, the translation I think is better than the original because it's called guardians. And they're responsible to assure that everybody is okay, that no one is actually having an experience that can cause actually some kind of panic attack. In Brazil, it is weird, the word, because it's fiscal, and fiscal is usually some kind of inspector. But that comes from the word of, this is another hymn, and I also want you to pay attention how the discipline works. You learn how to deal with the substance. And we also are not, people in the Daime knows that is not one miraculous dose that is going to reset your brain and make you feel better. They take the substance every time they have a ritual, usually every 2 weeks. So it is a process of learning that is slow. It is a process of learning that is not something that is easy, something that you have to work for. And the more you use the substance, the more you take Daime, the more you learn how to deal with ayahuasca. This is another. I wanted to also call attention for some. This is one of the most important hymns in the Daime. This is also composed by Mestre Irineu. No one wants to learn, after reflect upon, they are going to regret. Determination in your mind to follow the path. Although you may not learn much, you always learn a little bit. So that is one of the difference between the religious protocol. First, you have to have determination. You have to have discipline. You have to work all the time. And you are not going to have an experience that is going to be transformative in everything. You always have something that needs to be healed. And they do it by taking Daime in a religious context over and over. And if you think about it, the indigenous people, in different ways, they also take ayahuasca many different times. It's not some, magical bullet, some that's very way too much hopeful for the power of the substance. The discipline here can be seen in many different ways. The discipline here is not just, here. The discipline is to play instruments under the effect of ayahuasca. Sometimes the effect is way too strong. It is a substance that causes visions, that causes auditory hallucinations is that can cause extreme sense of disorientation as well. These people, they are not only playing instruments, but if someone starts the song out of tune, they're going to say, hey, people, it's out of tune. Let's start all over again. And they start all over again. And these people moving together with the maracá, the way you move your feet has to do with the way you shake the instrument. So everything is coordinated. Everything is rehearsed. Everything is embodied and required. A level of the discipline and control that also always surprised me, the ability they have to conduct these rituals with ayahuasca. So discipline is very important. When you're thinking about, again, alcohol abuse, I still don't have the answer if it's the ayahuasca or if it's the communal religious community. Because yes, you have the benefit of the substance, which is medicine for the indigenous people, which is medicine for religious context, and science is telling us now that it's medicine. But you also have someone who is going to go find a community, who is going to have something to do, who is not going to go back usually. And Santo Daime is very successful in recovering people with drug addiction and alcohol abuse. These people are going to find a new community, a new set of friends. The church in Santo Daime, in Brazil especially, has lots of initiative, like the agro. I actually wrote some of here. They have lots of environmental activism, agroecologists, reforestation, projects. So even if the person cannot find a job, they will give this person a job. So it is such a collective experience, and also that affects all the surrounding of people life, that is a little bit different sometimes, I think, with the experiences with the hope that we can have alone with the substances. I'm going to stop here. I have more stuff that I can show, but I want to the questions. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Larissa, for the wonderful presentation. I want to hand it over to the audience. Are there any particular questions that you would like to raise now? Please feel free to unmute yourself and share.
David Morgan, unmute yourself.
All right. Sorry, I was interested in hearing you say more. Early on, you referred to the bad trip and the term "paya" for it, but you didn't discuss. You didn't mention what that means in the context of Daime. It's not just a bad trip there. It's something more. Can you talk about that?
Yes. I think it's a very good question, because I think, another thing that you remind me something. I was just reading today scientific report, and was saying presenting the vomiting. So ayahuasca, like peyote, is very rich in alkaloids, and it provokes it's not. What is amazing about the substance, okay, is not the substance. Sometimes you puke, sometimes you vomit, sometimes you don't, sometimes nothing. So it is not that, oh yes, we're going to take ayahuasca, you're going to vomit. And today, for example, I was reading scientific biomedical research saying, side effects, adverse effects, vomiting. For the church is not an adverse effect. is not a side effect. It's part of the cleaning. For indigenous people as well, you have to clean yourself, either with diarrhea, either with or vomiting, and sometimes you have terrible experiences. But in the framework, both indigenous people in religious context is something that you have to go through. It's part of the learning. It is and the people in the church knows that. It's something in your mind, it's something that you sometimes don't know that was there, that needed to be addressed, and then the Daime gives access to some bad memory, to some trauma, to something that you don't have solved, and that's not good. That is not good, and doesn't need to be. So the bad experience that sometimes people in psychedelic science try to control way too much the experience to be a positive experience, sometimes the worst experience are the ones who teach you most.
I would have a question in regard to kind of the preparation for the experiences. In many ayahuasca rituals, there's a lot of fasting or a particular diet people do weeks or even months before the ritual. How is that in the Church of Santo Daime?
I think it would, like, although people often they don't drink alcohol before, okay? Usually vegetarian diet, it is advised as, better. I would not say that everybody does that. I know people in Daime that they took this. I know people in Daime that they raised in the religion and they take the substance since like 1-2 years old. So okay, they know so well to deal with that. Okay, they will not drink, but usually these people don't drink alcohol. There is a diverse effect of ayahuasca that in the Church of Santo Daime that is very, very prominent, that people stop drinking completely. Probably the substance. I do believe that is the substance that provokes something like that. So you have a diet. But I know people who no, they don't prepare themselves with a diet. I know people that are very, very vegetarian, and I think because of the experiences to kill an animal and consume an animal. There is a hymn, I brought another hymn that is about, disconnected with a bird. Yes, but I would say that is advised, but not completely. And something very interesting. Sometimes in Brazil, the Santo Daime has some kind of emergency care for people with terrible cases of drug addiction. So you have someone that is gonna come, and if you do some kind of blood test, you'll have cocaine in the blood. And that person is gonna take Daime immediately as some kind of medicine. So also, this is not a diet. This is actually some kind of two substances that we still don't know exactly how they work together.
Thank you.
Hey, Glenn, how are you doing?
Thank you. This is wonderful. I have a couple of questions. One is, if a person wants to leave the church, is there any pressure to stay in? And my other question is, are there medical complications? And if so, does the church have a way to address those medical complications when they come up?
Mm-hmm. Well, no, the church is not like you can leave the church anytime you want. The church first is doesn't do any proselytism. I think because it was born in such gray area, is it legal? It's not legal. Is legal in Brazil for religious use ayahuasca in religious context, but it is a church, that keeps their own business. And, you don't even need, if you don't want to, although if you are fardado, if you are a member of the church, you have the obligation to attend the work, the rituals, but you can leave anytime. There is no problem with that. Well, I don't think there are lots of studies with ayahuasca that we can answer your second question. For example, to what extent someone, for example, with schizophrenia can actually enter a state of psychosis, a psychotic breakdown with the use of ayahuasca. I think, and especially because there aren't studies with ayahuasca with this kind of population. So in this sense, I don't know the result. But one thing about the members of the church, they really believe in the power of Santo Daime. So the way they address is to stay with the person. Sometimes they're going to ask you, remove your shoes off, step on the grass. Usually the churches are kind of in the fringes of towns in some kind of natural setting, and they will be there for you. But that's the way they address. They are not going to give you another medicine, or they're not going to give you something. Once in a scientific setting, and you were having a conversation, someone said, and if someone started to have like a horrible experience with ayahuasca, what do I do? And someone said, oh, give a banana. And I don't know, maybe the banana becomes some kind of focus that you kind of change your mind and focus on banana and whatever. Maybe it's the sugar, maybe it's the potassium. I don't know. The people in the Santo Daime will not actually try to address, to try to minimize. They are trying to stay with you, but the journey is yours. Herbs are used. Indigenous people, actually, they use tobacco, and sometimes like the shaman is going to come to your face and it works in an amazing way, whatever they are doing. But I do think that is about the system of belief. I think in this sense, the mindset works very much, and the trust in the substance.
Thank you.
What kind of variation do you find in the ayahuasca from batch to batch? Is it routinely almost always the same, or are some batches more powerful and then you drink more? I mean, what kind of use quality control as a
Well, usually like in the ceremonies, like for producing what's called feitio. Feitio is the act of preparing. The first video that I showed is like the feitio, the ceremony for making. Usually they make a huge quantity for the whole year sometimes.
Okay.
So then you have like a batch that is kind of the same. Usually then another form of discipline. People who are preparing, and they have to know, and they are dealing with tons sometimes, kilos and kilos and kilos of that substance, and they need to know the ratio. And they are under the influence of ayahuasca as well. And they are making the ayahuasca. So usually you have this kind of batches, and usually the recipe they make is the same. But I'm going to say that sometimes that ayahuasca is pretty much like wine. The amount of rain, the soil that affects the grapes also affects, the way ayahuasca, the final product is. Usually it's pretty much strong. Usually the dose that you take would be like the dose of a shot. It's a small cup, something like this, and you're gonna take sometimes 3 times during the work. And I'm talking about people 8 hours, 10 hours, singing, non-stop, staying on the same place, sometimes sitting not dancing. Most of the works are sitting work, sitting. When including, you cannot cross your arms or legs. Even the sitting has to be with discipline. That is difficult. That is not fun at all. You know, can be beautiful and powerful, but it requires a lot of body discipline to do that.
Are the ceremonies at night or daytime or either?
Theoretically, at night. Theoretically, like they started, it's a living doctrine, so they are changing a lot. Usually it started when the sun was setting and would be all night long. But now it's been more common to start earlier because elderly people, you know, and sometimes even like, you know, the order of capitalist world, you have to work on the next day sometimes. So usually the works are Saturday to Sunday. And then people have to work on Monday. So I have seen more and more rituals that start, for example, 2 p.m., 3 p.m., and then ended 11 midnight. But I still have churches that started 6 p.m. and goes until 4 a.m., 5 a.m. So it depends. You know, the churches vary a little bit. They can actually make some rules.
Thank you.
Welcome. There is a question here. What is the process of working with those who had intense experience? How are those people helped integrating those visions? Amy, I think this question is very interesting. I think everybody's having a very intense experience, to be honest. A vision that is very common during the rituals of ayahuasca and the Church of Santo Daime is people cry a lot. And you don't know what's going on in their mind at that time. They're having extreme experiences. And I can tell about myself. I had extreme experience with the Church of Santo Daime. Some of them wonderful. Some of them very difficult. So it is different from the therapeutic setting completely. The process of integration, as we call in psychedelic assisted therapy, doesn't exist in Daime. This integration process, it is the community that gives to you. Usually after the rituals, you know, the substance has subsides in your body. For practical reasons, you have to drive back to your house, and you cannot drive under the effect of ayahuasca. People talk. They thank the experience. They offer a prayer for someone. They talk about their own experience. And also the next ritual, the next work. So this process of integration is not like in psychedelic assisted therapy that you're going to have one session, maybe 2 sessions, and then you're going to have the process of integrating your experience to the process of healing that you want. It is different. Doesn't have the integration as we call in the psychedelic assisted therapy. Someone talking about the living doctrine. How are the works organized nowadays? In Europe, US, other place outside of Brazil? How do the churches vary? It's a very, very good question. Very good question. I know there is a big church in Japan, and I would love to go. I would love to see a church in Japan. I have the pleasure and the honor to visit church here in the United States as well. And it was the first time for me very disorienting. The first time that I went, I had the most horrendous experience that I ever had and the best experience that I ever had. It transformed me sometimes, but it was because it was seeing Brazil in the West. They they keep the rituals very similar, the rituals in Brazil. All the hymns are singing in Portuguese. I have interviewed people, English speakers who don't speak Portuguese, who have received hymns, and that's the living doctrine, in Portuguese. This blows my mind. And I had the opportunity of singing these hymns received by people born in the United States. Beautiful hymn. One of the most beautiful hymns I've ever sang was written, received by a member of the Santo Daime Church here in Durham. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful, in Chapel Hill, actually. The church is very, not only like according to like the places, of course, they change, the demographics change. Here in the US, for example, people who attended the church tended to be more educated. In the Brazil, you have all layers of educational, social, economic background. In Brazil, some churches, for example, you have, since it is a syncretic religion, Catholicism, African matrix religions and indigenous religions, you have some religions that are more lean towards Umbanda and Candomblé. So spirits, deities, orishas play a bigger role. I have visited communities that's very Catholic, you know, like it's lean towards a way more Jesus, Mary, Joseph, and God. Has some elements as well of Umbanda, but more Catholic. So the churches change a little bit, and the hymns that they choose to sing also changes because the hymns are still being received. So people in churches have their own hymns. You know, they don't necessarily are gonna play the classics, that is Mestre Irineu or Padrinho Sebastião, Godfather Sebastião. That was the second most important leader of the church that actually spread the church all over Brazil and then the globe. But people sing the hymns, the book of hymns of the people from many different churches. So even the hymns that are sang sometimes is different. And by the way, in Amsterdam, there is like a kind of a competition. You know, what is the first church outside Brazil? What is the oldest church outside in Brazil? And there is always this competition between a church here in Oregon and the church in Amsterdam that I hope I can visit very, very, very soon. Joanna, are you allowed to participate in the ceremony as not a church member? Yes, absolutely yes. People in Santo Daime are very receptive. Usually you contact them. Usually some churches you actually have to have some kind of medical screening. I attended some churches that actually have some kind of qualtric forms, and they ask you questions like if you are in some kind of medication for like Lexapro, duloxetine, or fluoxetine, if you have another religion, if your age, you know, if you have some kind of history of mental disorders, if you have another religion, if your parents know that you are going to the church, you know, I love this question as well. My parents know that I'm going to the church. But yes, usually usually the churches have like, for example, websites or Instagram page, and you can contact them.
I would have another question from my side.
Yes.
How do you think we can integrate the learnings and experience from the church together with psychedelic research in the academic sense and scientific sense? Because I think we can learn a lot from indigenous communities and from communities of religious ones that have practiced with ayahuasca for many, many years. And there's so much quantity of experience there and the rituals and everything. How can these two sides be combined in the more traditional psychedelic therapy side?
It's a great question. And my answer, I think it changes depending on the moment that I am in my investigation. Sometimes I think that is actually they have to come together, we have to learn, but sometimes I say, is it possible completely? I think it is I think in scientific trials, they already have many elements, important elements from traditional uses of the substance. They know that music plays a huge role. You find as well in the scientific setting in Brazil, like playlist and Spotify, music to play during ayahuasca section. That is also different from songs that are sang in the Church of Santo Daime, that are hymns, that all the doctrine of the religion, all the teachings of the religions are the hymns. It's different from here, listen, for example, for a classic music or electronic music or a music that you like, minimalistic music that is to kind of try to induce a good experience, although we never know how we're going to do with music, how we're going to respond to that music. I think it's important to think about some stuff that is, first, the communal setting. In Brazil, it's very complicated to approve a protocol that is not individual. And in Brazil, sometimes the discussion with the equivalent of FDA in the United States, the Anvisa, of even creating an environment that is cozier, that is not some kind of white, completely without anything, decoration or dim light or flowers. Sometimes even adding flowers is complicated to approve a trial in Brazil. So I know that Netherlands, I know that Switzerland are trying, especially in ayahuasca retreats, some kind of communal trials, because we have technology to actually measure the experience there, although, you have questionnaires and not any single questionnaire, maybe it's enough to capture the experience, but we have ways of measuring. I told you that my perception changes a little bit, because even what people understand as the original now is not original. So there is no original. If you take the Kaxinawa people, for example, anthropological accounts of the Kaxinawa people in the 1960s, 50s, the way they used ayahuasca is completely different the way they're using ayahuasca, especially with itinerant shamans that travel all over Brazil. Sometimes they're invited to go to ayahuasca retreats in Europe and the United States to conduct ayahuasca ceremony. And those ayahuasca ceremonies were not the ceremonies that were described in the 1940s, 50s, 60s. So there is this encounter. There is this, I would not say clash, because is too aggressive, but there is this encounter of different uses of ayahuasca, and one is affecting the other. The same one that I think scientific trials are trying to look at indigenous knowledge and say, yeah, you have to have something out of them. The way indigenous people sometimes are using ayahuasca in trials, in ayahuasca retreats, or in this one-day experience all over the country, is not the original. I don't even know if the original ever existed, because now you will have archaeological evidence that indigenous nations were always exchanging recipes, experience, healing forms, and they were not pure. So depends on what you are calling indigenous knowledge, because the indigenous use of ayahuasca varies. They use for warfare as well. They use for hunting. They use for a lot of stuff. They use, for example, for inducing labor. The Church of Santo Daime still use that. Pregnant women take ayahuasca constantly. So it is a completely different set. And indigenous people, sometimes they use as, like the Kashinawa, they used to use, I don't know if they still use outside, the Western people, but they use like ayahuasca to see the invisible world and to see the spirit that was causing the illness. And they use it to actually to see some kind of magical dart that is called sensak. And I can curse you as well. It's not just for healing. There are shamans that are healings, but there are shamans that are also bewitchers. So, it is way more richer than the use of ayahuasca in the scientific, even in the religious contexts. Yeah, they use for everything.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, Emi Bragiato, that's my niece. She's a psychiatrist, my niece. She said they ask about antidepressants because there is a risk of serotonin crisis, because ayahuasca also acts on serotonin. Yes, ayahuasca is a serotonin receptor agonist. So yes, but there are no much studies, right, about that. So many studies about that. Okay. Any other question? Look forward to meet you personally one day. So I need to run. Okay, Matt. Hope to meet you some from North Carolina as well.
Okay, are there any
Or,
more questions from our audience?
Yes.
or I was going to ask, I'm just curious what your future plans would be, maybe, about this research. You mentioned you were writing a book.
Yes.
I'm just curious, anything you would have to say about that at this point?
Yes, I'm so first. Well, first, I'm very thankful for all the members of the Church of Santo Daime, because they really embrace my research, and we're very receptive, and have offered to me generous interviews. I finished now my observation. I'm going to spend some time in the community Céu do Mapiá. That is kind of the headquarter, not the first church, but kind of the, I don't know if you can call headquarter in Santo Daime, but it's a big church. I finished my observations there, and I am already writing some parts of my book. I actually, what I want is this conversation about science and religion. I hope my book can not be I don't want to write a book just for like religious scholars or anthropologists. I actually want my book to be read by biomedical research, because I wanted to contribute to this emergent field of psychedelic science that I think that is very promising, and actually thinking the questions that you posed about what is the contribution, how you can learn for these different contexts. I don't know to what extent they can be appropriated, but I think some stuff we can learn with the traditional, indigenous, and also in the religious context. So I hope that I make a contribution for this conversation of actually including like designing trials and what to expect from these substances. In Brazil, some research are being conducted with the members of the Santo Daime, not in the community, like in the lab, because their ability to actually, hold the experience in a scientific setting. Although we don't have yet experience, for example, of people in psilocybin, they did in Johns Hopkins, of putting people in an MRI machine to see what part of the brain is actually, more active and less active. But I hope to contribute to this conversation between science and religious settings.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Yeah. And I guess unless there's any final questions, we can end it there. So I'll say thank you so much again, Larissa.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate so much. And feel free to send me mail if you have more questions.
Yeah. Or also anyone that wants to reach out to us, feel free. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah. Or Larissa, I think someone asked for your email address in the chat. Would you be able
Yes,
to add?
I'm going to give it to everybody here. Um, uppercase letter is not necessary, you know. So that little girl over there is my grandniece. Well, nice to meet you guys. Emily, thank you so much for inviting me again.
Yes, thank you so much for your time. And you mentioned that maybe soon you would be coming to Amsterdam
Oh,
to visit the church
yes.
here. If you would want to meet up for, I don't
No,
know, a
and
coffee or something, feel free to reach out.
I will reach out. Of course I will. I hope to that we can get together. Maybe that you can visit the church with me.
Yeah.
I really wanted to go to the church in Amsterdam. Another thing that I didn't want to address everything, but like sometimes the Church of Santo Daime associate different substances, okay? Ayahuasca is one of them, is the major one, of course. But some churches actually, they use as well cannabis. And yeah, and what they call Santa Maria, Saint Mary.
Oh.
That is what they refer to cannabis. Some churches, as I said, churches are different. Some churches don't like it. No, ayahuasca is enough. We don't need anything. The dime is our thing. But other traditions, especially traditions that lean more toward the African traditions, they use Santa Maria consistently. And the church in Amsterdam is one of them.
Oh, really?
Yes. So people
Mm.
say, oh my God, if you wanted to have like an extreme experience, go to Amsterdam because, you know, the people have strong daime and strong cannabis. And I have this, I have an interview with one, I cannot interview children because our scientific protocol doesn't allow it, and in Brazil as well, no. But I can interview children who is adults now. And so I like to interview these people who are raised in the Santo Daime and have been taking ayahuasca. They don't even remember since when. And one of the girls, that's not a girl anymore, she's like in her 40s. She told me that one of the most extreme experience that she has was in Amsterdam, actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, because the use of Santa Maria together, it's a strong combination. I cannot even imagine. So yes, they use of different substance. There is another source of DMT that's called jurema. Is a tree. They work with the bark of the tree. That some also churches of Santo Daime also use jurema. That's another source of DMT. So you have different substances that the church use, although the religious ceremonies are around ayahuasca. Yeah. So I would definitely wanted to know. Isabella is asked, do you know what's the effect on an unborn child? You know, I don't. I try. And one thing that I would actually like to because there is no the only way to see the effect, like the effect would be with scientific trials, you know, unless beside that is empirical observation. All these children that I interviewed that were children, they are very creative human beings, you know, productive. Um, I don't know. And one thing that's very curious, none of them could tell me about an experience of ayahuasca. They didn't see the difference. So, and I say, well, how was to take ayahuasca when he was like 6 years old, 5 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old? They say, I didn't see the difference, which I think all the children, are already like full of DMT, in some sense. I don't know. It is so crazy. They don't remember. Some of them say, well, I would sleep most of the time. Of course, because it was like during the night, the rituals, that the time they would be sleeping. Others said, well, my mom said I would dance all the time. Sometimes they go outside to play and you don't even see that. It is so strange. But I don't know the effect an unborn child. And I have interviewed women who take Daime before they go to the hospital to have their child. So and if you think that they are actually taking ayahuasca since pregnancy, the child is being fed ayahuasca since its conception. It's interesting, but no studies about that.
Yeah, that does sound very interesting.
Yes, right. I would love to also. As far as I know, there is no scientific trial try to understand the use of ayahuasca in children. Like even with the members of the church.
Yeah, I imagine even if they're doing it anyway, that's probably a difficult thing to get ethical approval to study.
Exactly. It's very difficult. There is a question, it's important to have a tolerance level for it. Alil, I don't know if I pronounce your name correct. I don't know, Alil, I don't know if it's tolerance or if it's learning how to deal with is the discipline. Because these adults that I interview that has had ayahuasca since the beginning, they have extreme experience still now. I participated in one of them a short time ago, and at some point I look at him and he was crying. And afterwards I asked, why you're crying so much? And he said, my grandma, who passed away, she was with me holding my shoulders, and she stayed with me during the whole work, the whole ceremony. So they still have extreme experience to say that they have tolerance level, but that they learn how to deal with, yes. And if you talk about like people in the Santo Daime, the trust in the substance, it's very strong. And if you have a bad experience, in some sense, it's something that you have to deal with. So, you have to learn. You have to surrender. They trust the substance. You have to surrender. I think that is a better word. You have to let it go. You have to go where the substance is telling you to go, even if it's a voice, whatever, or vision. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. But I do think you learn how to. There is another question to at least DMT. Yes, there is no real tolerance. Yeah, I don't think so. Like because it doesn't work with your rewarding system, with your addiction. So you don't build like I don't know. I think, but I think you can learn. I think they learn to deal with. I'm always afraid. Now that you are like just asking, I'm always afraid. Every time that I take Daime is not something that I go, I'm gonna take Daime. I always, what's gonna happen, right now. And since we pray at the beginning, I always pray for the best. But to look at the people, the members of the church who are the most veterans members of the church helps, because you see, well, I can do it too. You know, if they are hanging there, if they are singing, if they are playing instruments, if they are, you see, elderly people, if they can do it, I can do it, because sometimes you are just exhausted. So it's a hard work. I think this is an interesting thing for science sometimes, you know. It's something that I have to think about a lot, like the effort that the people in the Church of Santo Daime, you know, undergoes with these experiences. It is a lot of work, and they call work, it's not by chance. You know, it is hard, it's difficult.
Okay, Larissa, thank you so much again for your time and for also staying longer for some more conversation.
Yeah, for me, it's afternoon. Yeah.
But I think unless there's one last question, maybe, let's wrap this event up. And again, thank you so much, and sending lots of love to the US. And we hope
Yeah.
to welcome you sometime here in Amsterdam.
Yes, if I go to
Maybe
Amsterdam, I'm
maybe
gonna
have some
contact you
coffee.
guys.
Yeah.